With bills piling up, she made a heartbreaking decision. She would sell it for only $80.
Witness in fire. It was Dean Martin, the egg water full of a sir.
The dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the window. Rebecca stood in the middle of her father's small apartment, surrounded by boxes she barely had the energy to pack. At 17 years old, she never imagined she'd be doing this alone. The piano sat in the corner like it always had, its dark mahogany wood still gleaming despite the layer of dust. Her father had loved that piano more than anything. Well, almost anything. He'd loved her more. She knew that. But the piano came pretty close. It was a 1920s upright Steinway. Her father had told her the story 100 times about how he found it at an estate sale 20 years ago. How he'd saved up for months, working double shifts at the restaurant where he played piano in the evenings. How he borrowed his friend's truck and drove all the way to Pasadena to pick it up. How it had been the best decision of his life, besides having her. Rebecca walked over to the piano and lifted the lid covering the keys. She pressed middle C. The sound was a bit off, out of tune. Her father would have hated that. He'd always kept it perfectly tuned, even in his last years when arthritis made his fingers too stiff to play properly. Those were hard times to remember. Watching her father sit at this piano, staring at the keys he could no longer play. Sometimes he'd try anyway, wincing through the pain just to hear a melody. She'd beg him to stop, but he'd just smile and say music was worth a little hurt. 3 months had passed since the heart attack took him. 3 months since she'd become completely alone in the world. Her mother had left when she was 5, just disappeared one day. Her father never talked about it much. He just held her closer and played the piano more. Now here she was, 17 and trying to figure out how to survive. Her father's sister, Aunt Linda, had been helping with the basics. Food, keeping the lights on. But Linda had made it clear from the start that she couldn't afford to put Rebecca through college or support her long term. She had her own family to worry about. The landlord had given Rebecca 2 weeks to clear out the apartment. 2 weeks to pack up an entire life and figure out where she was going next. The bills were piling up on the kitchen counter. Electric, water, the last of her father's medical expenses. Numbers that made her head spin and her stomach turn. She'd been going through everything, trying to see what could be sold. Her father didn't have much. His clothes were worn and outdated. His books were old paperbacks nobody would want. The furniture was cheap, the kind that came from discount stores and barely survived a few moves. But the piano was different. Rebecca knew it was valuable. Her father had mentioned once that it could be worth $600 or $700, maybe more to the right buyer. That kind of money could help. It could pay off the bills, give her something to start with. But how was she supposed to sell it? She didn't have money to hire movers. She didn't have a truck. She didn't even know anyone with a truck anymore. Her father's old friends had mostly drifted away over the years, or passed away themselves. The newspaper classifieds sat on the coffee table, already open to the for sale section. She'd been staring at it all morning, trying to find the courage to do what needed to be done. It felt like betrayal. This piano was her father's heart and soul. It represented every dream he'd ever had about making it as a musician. Sure, those dreams hadn't quite worked out the way he'd hoped. He'd spent his life playing in small lounge bars and hotel lobbies instead of concert halls. But he'd loved every minute of it. Rebecca sat down on the piano bench, the same bench her father had sat on thousands of times. She could almost feel his presence there, his gentle hands guiding hers when he tried to teach her to play. She'd never had his talent, but she'd learned enough to appreciate what he could do. A tear rolled down her cheek, then another. She wiped them away quickly, angry at herself for crying. Crying wouldn't pay the bills. Crying wouldn't solve anything. She stood up, walked to the coffee table, and picked up a pen. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote out the classified ad on a piece of scrap paper. Antique upright piano, $1.80 or best offer. Must pick up by Friday, $80. It was ridiculous. She knew it was worth so much more. But she needed someone who could move it themselves, someone who could take it quickly. She couldn't afford to wait around for the perfect buyer with the perfect price. She just needed it gone so she could move forward, whatever that meant. The next morning, she called the newspaper office and placed the ad. The woman on the phone didn't even question the price. She just took down the information and said it would run starting Wednesday. Wednesday came. The phone started ringing almost immediately. Most of the callers wanted to know what was wrong with it. Why so cheap? Was it broken? Did the keys work? Rebecca explained over and over that it just needed to be moved quickly, that she had no way to transport it. Some people showed interest. A few said they'd come by to look at it. But by Friday morning, no one had actually shown up. Rebecca was starting to panic. The landlord would be by Monday morning, expecting the apartment empty. She sat by the window Friday afternoon, watching the street below. Aunt Linda was coming tomorrow to help her move what little she was keeping to a small room. Linda had grudgingly agreed to let her rent. Everything else had to go. That's when she saw it. A sleek black Cadillac, completely out of place in this neighborhood, pulling up to the curb right in front of the building. The door opened, and a man in an expensive suit and sunglasses stepped out. Rebecca's heart started pounding. She had no idea who this was or what he wanted, but something told her that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Rebecca watched from the window as the man in the expensive suit looked up at the building, checking the address against a piece of paper in his hand. Her apartment was on the second floor, and she had a clear view of the street below. This guy definitely didn't look like the usual people who'd been calling about the piano. Her hands felt sweaty. She wiped them on her jeans and tried to calm down. Maybe he was here for someone else. Maybe he had the wrong address. People in cars like that didn't usually come to neighborhoods like this. The knock on the door came 30 seconds later. 3 polite taps. Rebecca took a deep breath and walked to the door. She checked through the peephole first, a habit her father had drilled into her. The man stood there patiently, his sunglasses now hanging from his shirt pocket. He had dark hair, perfectly styled, and a smile that seemed oddly familiar. She opened the door just a crack, the chain lock still securely in place. "Hi there," the man said, his voice as smooth and warm as honey. Rebecca blinked, confused. She quickly closed the door, unhooked the clinking chain, and swung it open again. This was Dean Martin. The real Dean Martin was standing in her late father's tiny, cluttered apartment. Rebecca's mouth went completely dry. She tried to form words, but nothing came out. Dean, however, seemed oblivious to her shock. "Beautiful instrument," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration as he ran a hand along the polished wood. Yes," Rebecca finally managed to squeak out. "My father bought it years ago." Dean lifted the dusty keyboard cover and pressed a few notes. "Needs a good tuning, but the bones are solid," he murmured, almost to himself. Dean reached out and picked up the photo from the Trocadero. "Tommy Richardson," Dean said quietly. It wasn't a question. Rebecca felt her heart do a little flip. "You knew my father?" Dean carefully set the photo back down and turned to face her fully. "I did, a long time ago now." He sat down on the piano bench, his eyes still fixed on the collection of photographs, a distant look on his face. Rebecca sank slowly into the worn armchair across from him, completely captivated. She had never heard this story. "He knew every single song I wanted to sing," Dean continued, a smile touching his lips at the memory. Dean's smile widened. Tears began to well up behind Rebecca's eyes. She'd grown up with the constant presence of that piano. What happened to him? Dean asked gently, his voice soft with concern. "If you don't mind me asking, heart attack," Rebecca whispered, her voice cracking. 3 months ago. It was very sudden. Dean nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. I'm so sorry. He was a good man, a truly talented musician. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. So you're selling it for $80. It wasn't a question, but Rebecca nodded anyway. I have to clear out the apartment by Monday, she explained, the words tumbling out. But Dean didn't seem fazed at all. Rebecca took the money, a strange mixture of relief and profound sadness washing over her. Dean folded his wallet and slipped it back into his pocket. Rebecca looked up at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Let me ask you something first, Dean said. What are you planning to do now? After you leave here? The question caught her completely off guard. In truth, she didn't have a plan. Dean nodded, as if he had expected that answer. How old are you? 17. Do you know anything about the music business? Rebecca shook her head, completely bewildered about where this conversation was headed. Dean walked over to the window and gazed down at the street below. He turned back to face her, his expression serious but kind. Rebecca just stared at him, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance, Dean corrected gently. She was speechless. Dean walked back to the piano and sat down on the bench once more. He played a few more notes on the piano, a gentle, familiar melody that Rebecca recognized from one of her father's old records. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more content just like this. See you next time. Rebecca felt her throat tighten. She wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this lifeline he was offering. But doubt crept in, the kind that comes from too many disappointments. What if I'm not good at it? She asked. What if I mess up? Dean stopped playing and looked at her directly. Then you mess up. Welcome to show business. Everyone messes up. The question is whether you're willing to learn from it and keep going. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. On the back, he wrote a phone number in neat handwriting. This is my office number. Call Monday morning and ask for Tony Benedetti. He's my manager. Tell him Dean sent you about the booking assistant position. Rebecca took the card with shaking hands. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, like it carried the possibility of an entire future she hadn't dared to imagine. The job starts part-time, Dean continued. You can finish high school while you work. After you graduate, if things work out, it becomes full-time. The pay is fair, better than what you'd make waiting tables or working retail. I don't know what to say, Rebecca whispered. Say you'll think about it, Dean replied. Call Tony on Monday, either way. Even if you decide it's not for you, at least you'll have considered it. Rebecca nodded, clutching the card. Then reality crashed back in. But what about the piano? You came here to buy it. Dean stood up and smiled, that famous charming smile she'd seen in movies. I did buy it. Gave you $80, just like the ad said. That's our deal, fair and square. He walked around the piano, examining it from different angles. Here's the thing, though. I've got instruments all over my house that I barely play. A guitar Frank Sinatra gave me, a drum kit from Sammy, even a harp some crazy producer thought I needed. This piano, as beautiful as it is, I've got no room for it. Rebecca's heart sank. So he was just going to resell it, or put it in storage somewhere. At least it would go to someone who appreciated it, she tried to tell herself. So I need a favor, Dean said, turning back to her. I need someone to store it for me. Keep it in good condition. Maybe even play it now and then, so it doesn't go completely dead. Pianos need to be played, you know. They get sad when they just sit there. Rebecca blinked, confused. What do you mean? I mean, technically, this piano belongs to me now. I bought it, paid cash, got myself a receipt. He pulled the $80 back out and showed her the bills. But I need someone to look after it. Someone who understands what it meant to its previous owner. Understanding slowly dawned on Rebecca's face. You want me to keep it? I want you to hold on to it for me, Dean corrected gently. Big difference. It's my piano, legally speaking. But you're doing me a favor by storing it and maintaining it. Can't have a Steinway like this falling apart because nobody's taking care of it. Tears started rolling down Rebecca's cheeks. She couldn't stop them. Why are you doing this? Dean's expression softened. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder, fatherly and kind. Because your dad helped me when I needed it. Because this business has given me more than I probably deserve. And sometimes you've got to give something back. And because I see a kid who's had it rough and deserves a shot at something better. He squeezed her shoulder gently, then let go. Also, selfishly, I think you'll be good at the job. I need people who care about music, not just people who see it as a paycheck. You grew up around a real musician. You understand what it means. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What if your manager doesn't like me? What if he thinks you're crazy for sending me? Dean laughed, a genuine warm sound. Tony thinks I'm crazy about a lot of things. He'll get over it. Besides, I'm not asking him. I'm telling him. That's the benefit of being the boss. He checked his watch, an expensive-looking gold piece that probably cost more than 3 months' rent. I've got to run. Meeting with some studio people in an hour, and traffic on Sunset is always murder. As he walked toward the door, Rebecca found her voice again. Mr. Martin? He turned back. Dean. Just Dean. Dean, she corrected, the name feeling strange in her mouth. Thank you. Really, I don't know how to repay you. Don't repay me, he said. Just show up Monday and give it an honest try. That's all anyone can ask? He opened the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. Get that piano tuned? I know a guy who's reasonable. I'll have Tony send you his number. A Steinway deserves to sound like a Steinway. I don't have money for, Rebecca started. Dean waved his hand dismissively. Send me the bill. It's my piano, remember? My responsibility to maintain it. And just like that, he was gone. Rebecca heard his footsteps going down the stairs, heard the building's front door open and close. She ran to the window and watched as he got back into the black Cadillac. He glanced up, saw her watching, and gave a small wave before driving away. Rebecca stood there for a long time, staring at the business card in her hand. Then she looked at the piano, her father's piano, which was now somehow both sold and still hers. She walked over to it and sat down on the bench. Her fingers found the keys, playing the simple melody her father had taught her years ago. The notes were out of tune, but that would be fixed soon. For the first time in 3 months, since that terrible day the hospital had called, Rebecca felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. She looked at the photographs of her father, young and full of dreams at various pianos in various clubs. I think you would have liked this, Dad, she whispered. I think you would have told me to take the chance. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, making the dust particles dance like tiny stars. Rebecca sat at the piano and played, thinking about Monday morning and a phone call that might change everything. Monday morning came faster than Rebecca expected. She'd spent the entire weekend second-guessing herself, staring at Dean's business card until she'd memorized every detail. What if this was all some kind of mistake? What if he'd forgotten about her by now? What if his manager laughed at her for calling? Aunt Linda had helped her move the few belongings she was keeping into the small room at the back of Linda S. house. The piano stayed in the apartment for now, thanks to a phone call Dean had apparently made to the landlord. Rebecca didn't know what he'd said, but suddenly the landlord was perfectly fine with the piano remaining there for another month while she figured out where to move it. She sat on the edge of her new bed, which was really just a mattress on the floor, and picked up the phone. Her hand trembled as she dialed the number Dean had written on the card. Martin Productions, a woman's voice answered on the second ring. Rebecca's mouth went dry.
Hi. I'm looking for Tony Benedetti. May I ask who's calling? My name is Rebecca Richardson.
Dean Martin told me to call about a position. There was a pause. "One moment, please." Music played through the line, some instrumental version of a song Rebecca didn't recognize.
Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was crazy. She should just hang up. This is Tony.
The voice was gruff, no nonsense, with a thick New York accent. "Hi, Mr. Benedetti. Dean told me to call you about a booking assistant position." Another pause, longer this time. Rebecca could hear paper shuffling in the background.
You're the kid with the piano, Tony said finally.
It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Tony sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested he'd had a long conversation with Dean about this already.
All right, listen. Dean's got a lot of crazy ideas, and I've learned to just go with most of them. You got any experience in entertainment? Booking? Office work? Rebecca's heart sank. No, sir.
But I learn fast, and I'm willing to work hard.
How old are you? 17. I'll be 18 in November. More papers shuffling. You in school? I'm a senior. I graduate in June. Tony was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was slightly softer. Dean told me about your father. Tommy Richardson.
Said he was a good man. He was, Rebecca said quietly.
Here's the deal, Tony said. I'm not making any promises. But Dean wants to give you a shot, so we'll give you a shot. You come in Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock. I'll show you what the job actually involves, see if you can handle it. If it works out, you work part-time until you graduate. Then we talk about full-time. Sound fair? Yes. Sir, very fair. Thank you. Address is on the card Dean gave you. Don't be late. And kid, Tony's. Voice got serious. Dean's sticking his neck out for you here. Don't make him regret it.
I won't, Rebecca promised. I swear I won't.
Wednesday afternoon, Rebecca stood outside a building in Hollywood, checking the address 3 times to make sure she had it right. The sign read Martin Productions in gold letters. Through the glass doors, she could see a modern lobby with leather chairs and framed posters of Dean's movies. She'd borrowed a dress from Aunt Linda, the nicest thing she owned. It was a bit too big, but she'd belted it to make it work. Her shoes were old, but polished until they shined. Inside, the receptionist directed her to the 3rd floor. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. When the doors opened, Tony Benedetti was waiting. He was shorter than she'd expected, maybe 50 years old, with slicked-back gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through her.
You're early, he said. That's good.
He led her down a hallway lined with gold records and photographs. Dean with Frank Sinatra. Dean with Jerry Lewis. Dean on movie sets, on stage, receiving awards. It was overwhelming. Tony's office was organized chaos. Papers everywhere, 3 phones on the desk, a calendar covered in scribbled notes. He gestured to a chair, and Rebecca sat down carefully.
You know what a booking assistant does? Tony asked, sitting behind his desk. Rebecca shook her head. Not really. Honest. I like that. Tony pulled out a folder. Dean's got a lot going on.
Movies, TV specials, the new club opening in October, personal appearances. All of those need entertainment. Bands, singers, comedians, whatever.
My job is to make sure the right people are in the right place at the right time.
He opened the folder and showed her pages of typed lists and schedules. Your job would be helping me with that. Answering phones, keeping track of who's available when, calling musicians to confirm gigs, filing contracts.
Boring stuff mostly. You think you can handle boring?
Yes, sir, Rebecca said. Tony studied her for a moment. Why do you want this job?
And don't tell me because you need the money. Lots of jobs pay money.
Rebecca thought about it carefully. She wanted to give him the right answer, but she also wanted to be honest. My father spent his whole life in music. He never made it big, but he loved it anyway. Every night he'd come home from whatever club he was playing, and he'd have stories about the songs, the other musicians, the people he met. Even when his hands got too bad to play, he still listened to records every day. She looked Tony in the eye. He taught me that music matters. Not because it makes you famous or rich, but because it connects people. It makes them feel things. I want to be part of that world, even if it's just answering phones and filing papers. Does that make sense? Tony leaned back in his chair.
For the first time since she'd met him, he smiled.
Yeah, kid. That makes sense. He stood up, come on. Let me show you round.
The next few hours passed in a blur. Tony introduced her to other staff members, showed her filing systems, explained how the phones worked. There was so much to learn it made her head spin. But Rebecca paid attention to everything, asked questions when she'd understand, took notes in a little notebook she'd brought. At 6 o'clock, Tony told her to come back Friday, same time.
We'll start you on the phones. See how you do. Pay us $75 a week to start, 3 afternoons a week. If you work out, we'll bump it up after you graduate.
$75 a week. Rebecca had to force herself not to gasp. That was more money than she'd ever made in her life.
Thank you, Mr. Benedetti, she said. I won't let you down. Call me Tony, he said gruffly.
And we'll see. Show up, work hard. Don't cause drama. That's all I ask.
Rebecca practically floated out of the building. On the street, she found a payphone and called Aunt Linda to tell her the news. Linda sounded surprised, but pleased. Good for you, honey. Your father would be proud. That night, Rebecca went to her father's old apartment one last time. The piano tuner Dean had come earlier that week, and now when she played, every note rang out pure and clear. She sat at the piano and played the songs her father had loved. Show tunes, jazz standards, old melodies from his days playing the clubs. The music filled the empty apartment, and for a moment, she could almost feel him there beside her.
I got the job, Dad, she whispered. Dean really came through. Can you believe it? Dean Martin actually came through.
She thought about that Friday afternoon when she'd been ready to give up everything, when selling the piano for $80 had seemed like her only option. And then a black Cadillac had pulled up and changed her entire life. Over the next few months, Rebecca learned the entertainment business from the ground up. She answered phones, coordinated schedules, learned the names of every musician in Los Angeles. Tony was tough but fair, and he taught her everything he knew. Dean would stop by the office sometimes, always friendly, always asking how she was doing. He never made a big deal about helping her. To him, it was just what you did when you had the chance. The piano stayed in her father's old apartment until Rebecca saved enough to rent her own small place. When she finally moved it, she had it positioned in the corner of her living room, right where it could catch the afternoon light, just like it had at her father's. Years later, when people asked Rebecca how she got her start in the music business, she'd tell them about the piano, about her father, and about the day Dean Martin showed up to buy an $80 Steinway. He didn't just buy a piano, she'd say. He gave me a future. And every time she played that piano, every single time, she remembered that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes all you need is one person to believe in you, to give you a chance when you need it most. The piano still sits in Rebecca's home today, perfectly tuned, played regularly. On top of it are 2 photographs. One of her father, young and hopeful at the Trocadero Club, and one of Dean Martin, signed with a simple message. To Rebecca, keep the music alive. Your friend, Dean. She did keep it alive. She kept her promise. And she never forgot the lesson that piano taught her about kindness, second chances, and the power of one person's generosity to change everything.